Look, let's get into it. We've got a lot to talk about today. We'll start off with the game on the weekend against Manchester United, obviously a 2-2 draw at Old Trafford. We'll start off with you, HG. I mean, how are you looking at that result and performance? Do you think that was a good point to take, or do you think maybe we dropped a few points there?
I think based on the performance in the game, considering how well we seem to play compared to Man United, it feels like 2 drop points. It really does. I understand it's Old Trafford. We don't win there very often, but forget the ground for a second. If you play that well against a team, any team in the Premier League, you need to win those games. I get that it's not a defeat. It's another away point, a place we lost last season. It's all progress, but there were 3 there for us, and I think we should have got them.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, at the end of the game, I was a bit disappointed because Man U are coming into it in the form that they're coming into it. We put in a dominant display, and I really think when you look at the game and when you look at the two sides and the trajectory of the two sides this season, I think it was 2 points dropped, to be honest. Johnny, how are you looking at the game? Were you happy at the end of it, or do you think it was a bit 2 points dropped there?
I was quite conflicted throughout the whole game, to be truthful with you, because, when I saw Kulu missing and I saw a midfield of Oliver Skip and Højbjerg and a sort of 70% fit Bentancur, I did fear the worst, I have to be honest. And when Højlund put the ball in the back of the net, I did worry, I've got to be honest. I think there was lots to take away that were positive. I thought our resilience, to be honest with you, has been fantastic this season. That's our 3rd draw away, 2-2 at Arsenal, 3-3 at Man City, 2-2 here. The City game and this Man City and the Man United game, both games missing key individuals. And I think, yes, I'm disappointed because yes, we could have and should have won it in the second half with our domination. But there again, we do have that vulnerability with McTominay sort of header near the end, which could have lost it for us, like we did sort of West Ham and Villa. So I am conflicted. I think, if we take it on balance, we have to be happy with a 2-2 with the team we put out. But yes, we could have done better.
Sim, your take?
I think having all the circumstances surrounding the game, viruses in the camp, no creativity whatsoever. Literally, if you think about all our creativity in our squad, it's literally been stripped out of that team. Apart from maybe Pedro Porro, we literally had no creativity going into this game. A midfield with Skip and Højbjerg playing in the middle was always going to be difficult to break down. A team like Man United, who like to play on the transition, who pride themselves on being a bit defensively solid. Well, they're not the most defensively solid team, but how they like to play is they kind of suck you in and then they hit you on the counter. That Rashford and Garnacho, attacking the space, and that's exactly what their plan was, and it definitely worked in that first half. Hitting us in those channels where the space was. Before the game, I predicted that this game probably, in a weird way, came a week too early for us because Romero and Van de Ven literally just coming back from injury, especially Romero only having a couple of training sessions. Werner literally just getting off the plane from Germany, having a couple of training sessions as well for him. Plus there was a virus in the camp going into it. I felt like if this game was a week later, we would be in a much stronger position. But I predicted Man United were probably catching us on a good day for them because of all those factors. And I think that probably bore out in the game. I think the fact that we went behind twice, we didn't crumble, we continued to play the football that Ange Postecoglou has trained us to play all season, and the fact that we dominated the game as we did, we controlled the game as we did, even without those players that I mentioned. We still were able to create challenges, we hit them back, we reacted to going behind both times really, really well. And that was really positive. And I think when you're looking at it from an objective point of view, in terms of where we are in the season and in Ange's project, the fact that we've shown we can come back in these big away grounds, not get overawed by the occasion, and continue to play the football that we want to play. I think that's definitely an overall positive. I think there's definitely more positives than negatives going into this game. The fact that Richarlison kept in his winning run together, the fact that Bentancur got 90 minutes and got on the score sheet as well. These are all very positive things. But I think HG is absolutely spot on in the fact that there was definitely 3 points for us there. Man United never really looked. I know they had that chance to end the game. They never really looked like winning the game. If anyone was going to win it, I think Spurs were the ones in the ascendancy. And the frustrating thing is, with all the possession that we had, we just lacked a bit of incisiveness, we didn't really create too many clear-cut opportunities, apart from maybe the goals we scored. That was the frustrating thing. I don't remember too many chances where I'm looking back and thinking we should be scoring there, or that was a gilt-edged opportunity, apart from maybe the Werner chance he missed in the first half. But I think overall I'm happy. Yeah, Romero hit the bar from set pieces. Yeah, maybe we could have capitalised from set pieces a bit more.
Porro's delivery was insane that day. I mean, every single corner was on the money, wasn't it?
It was, and he's got unbelievable delivery. I think he's shown that the whole season. I think it was a good performance. I think definitely is a twinge of disappointment that we didn't go on and win 3 points, but a point away from home against Man United. Look, they beat Villa recently at their stadium. So you can never take it for granted that going to Man United is going to be an easy game. But 100%, this is one of the poorer Man United teams we've faced in recent years. So there has to be a bit of disappointment we didn't win. But I think in the context of our season, it's probably a good point.
Yeah, I'm not... Go on, HG.
This is the thing. Like, we all talked about our midfield and how relatively weak it was because we didn't have anyone else. But I looked at Man United's midfield and I saw Fernandes, Eriksen and Mainu. And I looked at that and thought, well, our three are better. Even with Skip almost being a pressing machine as the 10, it felt like in the first half, I expected us to kind of dominate the game. The goals were more disappointing because these are half chances. They're barely chances, and they're putting them away. Granted, in a way they didn't do in the first game, but still, it just felt like maybe with a bit more invention or a bit more positivity, bringing on Royal and maybe pushing Porro further forward would have meant we had some kind of guile up front, because none of us really think that Richarlison's going to create chances. Werner's not really going to create stuff, and neither's Johnson. He's not really done that for Spurs either. Like, if you're going to have someone, you need to have someone to kind of to put the bullets in the machine, right? Like, otherwise, it's just they're all waiting for someone else to do it, and that was the tough part. Like, both keepers had very little to do. I mean, United didn't create anything, and we didn't really create much. It was set pieces, and the Bentancur scored. I don't feel like Onana had a save to make, really.
Yeah, that was. I think also the biggest.
Same with Vicario, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. But I think probably the thing that really cost us, I think when I look back at it, wasn't necessarily the fact of the lineup that we had, but it was more that we couldn't really add anything from the bench to really give us a second wind. I feel like we were really running on empty in those last 20 minutes. We were clearly tiring a lot. Actually, Man United grew a bit in the right at the end of the game. You know, McTominay had that chance on the edge of the box, which he dragged wide, and then he had the chance for a header as well. And I actually think those changes, when Man United made those changes, they brought Martinez and McTominay on, that did benefit them. And we couldn't really do that. We couldn't really change it. We brought on Bryan Hill, didn't really affect the game. We couldn't really bring on any midfielders to give us a bit more energy in the centre as well. And that was probably the killer. I think if we had some options off the bench to come on and change the game and give us a bit more energy in the last stage, I think we have a much better chance of winning that game. But I felt like Ange didn't really trust the bench players, and I felt like he would rather keep the tired players on who were lacking in energy in their latter part, rather than use the bench players. And maybe you can say that's a stick to beat him with, but look, at the end of the day, the bench was lacking in experience, quality, maybe you could argue, and that was maybe the big difference as well.
I think it was. I think look, the bench. There was a lot of weakness in that team. What I like about this team is, under Conte, we spent such a long time. It looked like every player was fearful of losing the ball and what the repercussions may be. And we played with fear. And this season, we play with no fear. You know, you see players trying to play out the back and making mistakes. No one is telling them off. No one is shouting at them. It's part and parcel of the game. And, you know, even when we're looking at that midfield against Man United, I mean, I'm no Oliver Skip fan. He's extremely limited, right? He tries 100%. But, you know, that pass, for example, that pass out for Werner, right? Now, if that had been made by another player, we would have been applauding it, right? It was superb. It was absolutely superb. And for the second goal, the run he made before he passed out wide to Werner, but what was more intelligent was the run into the box to create the space for Bentancur to receive that ball. there were lots of positives, and the bench was weak. The one thing about Ange that I quite often comment about is in-game management, and some of the substitutions. I thought Brennan Johnson was extremely poor during the game, and I would have liked to have seen Gill come on for Brennan Johnson personally. But I think in years gone by, we've gone with far better teams, strong teams, to Manchester United, to Old Trafford, and we've come away with nothing. This was our first chance, I think, to do the double over them since about 89-90. And I thought it was a fantastic effort. I think there's lots to be, happy about with that performance. But yeah, all said and done, it was there for the winning. But you could say the same for Villa. You could say the same for West Ham. Points lost.
Johnny, I think you're completely right. I mean, Ollie Skipp should be coming in for a lot of praise for that performance at Old Trafford. I mean, at one point, he was doing kick-ups over the Manchester United midfield. I was like, what is going on here? Is this the Ollie Skipp that I know? No, I'm not so sure. But he put in a great performance, Ollie Skipp. He really did. But also, back to your point on Brennan Johnson, I'm seeing a lot of criticism coming in for Brennan Johnson at the moment, saying, oh, he's not good enough. We've bought a dud, all this kind of stuff, 50 million. We've overpaid, blah, blah, blah. I mean, what are you guys' opinions on Brennan Johnson? Because I've seen some good things in there from Brennan Johnson. I want to see him grow in that Spurs shirt, and I believe in his abilities. I mean, HG, what's your thoughts on Brennan?
Oh boy, look, I haven't been impressed. Let's put it that way. I really haven't been impressed. I had a goal at Wolves, which was a good piece of anticipation to get to the near post and poke it in. But when you think about probably what you would expect a winger in Ange Ball to do, I just haven't seen it. He's got lots of space, but he never really uses it. He tends to take the safe option if he does get it. It's frustrating. And I think that's how I see it, like a player. But we're seeing the Forest player that was last season. It just seems safe. And like maybe Ange is asking that. Maybe he realizes that perhaps right now we don't have real... So he wants to move the ball in field as much as possible. Maybe he's an injury, but I'm sitting here for excuses for him because when you review the performance, right? I mean, you can count the amount of assists and you can count, but to me, it's about more than that. Like, how involved are you? Are your teammates passing you the ball? Sometimes I feel like Porro doesn't want to give it to him, and that's a problem. And like, I don't care about the price tag because there's nothing Johnson can control about that, right? We decided he was worth it. Forest wanted to sell, fair enough. But I do kind of blame him for what we're seeing on the, because I can't just telling him to play the way he is.
Yeah, I mean, there are some elements that I agree with that, but, he is still a new player playing a new system. He's never played this kind of system before, coming from Forest, who play strictly on the transition and counter-attacking football. And I do believe that he can grow into an Ange Postecoglou system. Ange seems to believe in him as well. Johnny, do you agree with HG? I'm not sure if you heard that, but he said that he wasn't, he's not so happy with Brennan at the moment of what he's showing in a Spurs shirt. Do you agree?
Look, it's quite interesting actually because I watched Spence before we signed him from Forest, and I didn't like his body language. I didn't like the way he was walking around like he was better than the players there. I didn't want us to sign him. And Brennan Johnson was a big fish in a small pond, in my opinion. I'm not saying he didn't do well for Forest, which he did. But I personally didn't think that he had the right attributes that we needed for the club. I mean, if you were offering me Elise or you were offering me Brennan Johnson, I know which one I would have taken all day long.
Of course.
And for the money as well. Now, Brennan Johnson for me is often Brenda Johnson. He's so lightweight in the challenge. I saw little Brian Gill, who gets so much stick for being a wafer and would get blown over in the wind. He comes on, and in the first 15 minutes, he's gone for two or three 50-50 challenges. Hefty. I see Johnson pulling out. of these challenges, and it's just not good enough. I don't think his football IQ is up there where it should be. And second of all, you know, your responsibility when you're playing in this system is when you're playing with Pedro Porro, you have to track back, right? And at 22 years of age, right, I expect you to be tracking back. I expect you to have an engine to track back and cover that space. Now, the problem we got now is what was exposed at Bournemouth and exposed again in this game. When you're not tracking back, the space you're leaving behind for the team to exploit is vast. And, you know, Skip had a really good game, but he's not Papa Sarr. Papa Sarr is intelligent enough to cover that space, to give Porro that cover. Johnson, for me, look, he's got age on his side and he's got pace on his side. You can't teach pace. Hopefully, Ange can teach him some football IQ. But right now, with a full-strength team, I don't believe he is a starter. He is coming off the bench 15, 20 minutes for me. I think it was a huge commitment from the club to spend nearly £50 million on Harry Kane's money on that. And it makes no sense to me that so much due diligence has been made with all of these transfers that we've done recently for value and everything. And then along comes this signing. This, to me, sounds like a signing that Ange has requested, not saying there's anything wrong with Ange, but, you know, that he's requested and the club have said, OK, we're going to give you the player that you want, which rightly so. You know, you have to back the manager. I'm just questioning right now the validity of signing such a player because he's not showing it to me right at this moment.
I mean, I think, like Ben said,
those crosses, my God, 2 of those crosses.
Yeah, it was awful.
Horrendous.
It was awful. I think that was his worst performance in a Spurs shirt, that game against United.
Horrendous. Well, hang on. What about Brighton? I mean, I had to go down to Brighton and endure that. I mean, he was shocking at Brighton. Shocking.
Yeah, luckily I didn't make the trip to Brighton. HG, what are you about to say?
No, the fact is, I mean, it is clearly an Ange signing. I'm pretty certain Ange wanted him at Celtic when he first took over there, and he hadn't even done anything for Forest at that point. So I've no doubt, or at least I expect him to get better at whatever he's being asked to do. But yeah, right now with all the injuries, that's why he's playing every game. But, you know, we talk about he's only young. That's very true. He's 5 weeks older than Van der Ven. Van der Ven's come in pretty much the same time of the season, come in straight into the team and looks as if he belongs. And so, like, you know, what 1 year in the Bundesliga versus 1 year in the Premier League, the attitude seems to be different. And I like, is it a mentality thing? Is it an attitude thing? Like, is Van der Ven come here to know he's going to be the man and wants to be the man? And has Johnson come in thinking, you know what, I probably won't play every game. I can kind of relax a little bit. And he's been forced to play every game because of the injuries and everything. And it just feels as if something isn't right there. And it's sad because, like, we've seen players come good over time, right? So it's not as if he's a terrible player. It's not as if he won't become maybe what Spurs fans want him to be. But right now, we just haven't seen it. And that, to me, is the problem.
Yeah, and that
we have seen glimpses. You know, he had those assists for Richarlison were very effective. It showed an ability to play accurate low crosses exactly where Richarlison wanted it and feed the strikers. I remember that assist for Sonny in the Chelsea game, which was slightly offside, was a really good pass as well. Like, I think is his tally at the moment is 5 assists and a goal so far this season. I mean, it's not terrible. I mean, I know he's 22 and I know he's not a teenager, but he is still very young. He is still very raw, and it was always going to be a bit of a project. It was never a signing I expected to come in and hit the ground running straight away. Maybe he hasn't shown as much as I hoped he'd shown in terms of quality in the final third. I think definitely some of his decision making and some of his crossing has been really, really poor. But I do think we've also seen some really good things. I remember against Newcastle in that game, he absolutely ran their left back ragged that game and hit the post twice, and he was getting in goal-scoring positions. He was looking really effective. I think we have seen some good things that showed to me he could be a really good right winger. I just think it's going to be a bit of a process with him. He's still very young. He's been playing in a very different system last season at Forest, he was very much playing in a counter-attacking system where every time he got the ball, he had loads of space in front of him, and he had a lot of grass to run into, and that was his game. And that is where he looks his best at Spurs, when in those moments in transition. So it's definitely going to have to be an adaptation period. But I don't think he's doing as. I mean, I would like to see him do more, but I don't think he's been as bad as a lot of people making out. I think he's been decent.
Yeah, and I think HG's spot on in what he's saying. You know, the comparison between Van de Ven and Brennan Johnson, right? The difference is Van de Ven was come in to be our starting centre-back week in, week out, play week in, week out. Brennan Johnson was supposed to come in and play kind of a squad role this season. And because of the injuries, we've kind of been hamstrung to shoehorning him into that right wing position, left wing position, wherever he can fit because of the injuries that we've had so far this season. So I do feel for Brennan a bit. But look, I have seen good things in there from Brennan, and I do fully expect him to grow in a Spurs shirt. But look, let's move on.
Though, Ben, are we really saying that spending £47 million is a project? I mean, for me, I'm sorry, I have to disagree, because I believe you spend 20 million and 18 million on a project to develop a player, bring them through, stick them on the bench, bring them through and develop them. I'm all for that. And I think, when you look at Don Fabio's, signings, a lot of them are exactly that. But £47 million on this player, listen, nobody hopes that he fails, okay? We've been through it. Look at Richarlison. I was telling everybody Richarlison's carrying an injury. No one's interested because he wasn't performing. He didn't run properly. He didn't hold the ball up properly. His first touch was awful. Suddenly, he's finally had this operation. And now we got a guy who's performing, scored more goals than any player in the Premier League since the beginning of December. And he's turned his whole game around. And we hope the same for Brennan Johnson, right? We hope the same. But to call it, a project, he's meant to sit on the bench. I'm sorry, we should be spending that sort of money on a player who's going to come straight into the team and is going to add.
The way, Johnny,
just to finish, just bearing in mind that you're talking about spending 47 million. It's the cost of Papa Sarr, Destiny Udogie, and Vicario combined.
Yeah, I get that. But, he comes with that English tax as well, which we desperately needed at the time. Homegrown. That we desperately needed at the time. But when you look at it...
An attacking player is always going to be more expensive.
And when you look at it, right... We bring him in, a right winger. At that time that we brought him in, Kulusevski had made that right wing spot his own. Heung-min Son and Richarlison or whoever were sharing that left wing and striker role. So he wasn't brought in to come in and start every game week in, week out. The same with Richarlison. We spent 60 million on Richarlison when we had Harry Kane up top and Heung-min Son on the left. So he wasn't coming as well to play a starting role week in, week out straight away. So we are spending this kind of money, not just on players that are coming and start straight away and say you're going to be our star man, but they're coming in to make our squad better as a whole.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I can't deny that. I think, Richarlison as Brazil's starting centre forward in the World Cup is rather more further developed than Brennan Johnson. But I hear your point.
I think when you did we overpay for Brennan? Potentially, but I think we're looking at a very young forward who's had one season in the Premier League. He is homegrown. He was Nottingham Forest academy product who they absolutely love. They loved him there. He was one of their main attackers, one of the reasons they stayed up last season. So he was worth a lot to the setting club. So if we really wanted him, we were going to have to overpay. And look, that we have been criticised in the past for wanting a player but not wanting to pay the price of the setting club, and now we did it, and now we're getting criticised for overpaying. And was it an overpayment? I probably was. I do agree. It probably was an overpayment for the player that he was in the market, but if you want a homegrown player signing from a fellow Premier League team, there's always going to be a hike up in the price, and that's just reality. And we decided to pay it, and I'm willing to be a bit patient. I'm not just going to look at the price and write him off after 6 months. Where even in this 6 months, it's not even been that bad. I just think it was an overpayment, but I'm willing to be a bit patient with it, and I think he's doing okay. It was a terrible performance against United. I'm not going to deny that. I'm not going to sit here and say he was great, but I have seen enough from him in his time at Spurs so far to suggest we do have a decent player here, a good player.
Let's be real. Richarlison's first year has been a lot worse than Brennan Johnson's first 6 months.
100%. But we saw the other day, Brentford offered between 30 and 35 million, and that was accepted by Forest. and we ended up paying 47. So, you know, no one can accuse Daniel of lowballing.
We'll get on to Daniel. We'll get on to Daniel Levy soon. Go on, HG.
Yeah.
This is why the price tag, like, I understand as a club, the price tag is important because we do have limited funds in some way. We still spend a lot of money on players, so it's not as if we're poor. But, you know, every bit that we spend on someone else means we can't go and buy probably the left winger that we're going to need, right? Because at some point we're going to need to buy better attackers. I do think that's probably the next stage of the development. And when you put it on Johnson and you think maybe I shouldn't have done that much, okay. Like, to me, like, if it's 50 million, let's say we're doing it in 3 installments. Do you know what I mean? It's not 50 million right now, but it is money that is going to come out, and we can't spend it in other areas. I just feel that, like, to me, if you look at Timo Werner, I don't feel like there's much difference between Werner and Brennan Johnson. They have lots of pace, and the rest is up in the air a little bit. We don't know what we're going to get, but they've got lots of pace, which is going to be useful. But you could get Timo Werner on loan, and you could get Brennan Johnson for 50 million. So to me, there was another option out there. I know that Ange really wanted Johnson. I really believe that, which is great because I want him to get the players he wants. It just, if you're going to talk about the price tag, then I think there would have been better options. But for right now, I only really care about what Brennan is doing. If he's going to be the guy that gets on the end of through balls, which I think is where we've seen the best of him, then great. But we need to have players who can produce those through balls, and we didn't really have it at Man United. So you can't blame Brennan too much. But if I'm going to sit here and say that then once he's through, that he's able to cross the ball low and accurately is worth 50 million? No, I don't think it is. I think it's a great skill to have, but I think it's a skill that most professional football players should be able to do when they're 5 yards ahead of the nearest defender. Like, he's under no pressure when he makes those passes. So, like, assists are great, but some to me are better than others. And
you're right, HG. I don't know. You know what, HG? You know, at the Brighton game, the player that comes in for so much criticism, Højbjerg, put in 2 beautiful balls over the top for Brennan Johnson. Clear. He was clear. And he did nothing with either of them. You know, these are basics, right? I don't expect him to score every game. But when you put through and you've got that pace, use your football IQ to make the right decision. Either shoot or make the cross, but don't be caught between a rock and a hard place where you don't know what to do with the ball, right? Okay, you're 22 years of age. You've been playing football all your life. You should have that basic decision-making, sewn up, in my opinion. Not everything should be correct, but those basics that you mentioned should be better.
Nobody's expecting Gareth Bale Mark II.
Correct.
Right? Even though he's Welsh and a winger. No one's expecting him to come in and be the best player in the team.
100%. Yeah.
But what he's offered, like, we probably could have got that from Soonsup Bell, if I'm honest. Like, he doesn't have the pace that Johnson has. But it's just... It's tough, like, because, like, everyone will say that I'm slagging him off, and I don't feel like I really am. I want him to be better, but I would say that about any player who I feel is not doing what they can. He's got this electric pace that he never takes players on. Like, even if it was a simple, I'm going to kick the ball 20 yards ahead and see if I get there. Brilliant, you might win a corner, you'll do something. But if you're just going to pass it back to Porro or inside to whoever, I could do that. Sorry.
But there's the difference, HG, between Timo Werner and Johnson, and I think that's the reason he signed him. Werner's football IQ is so much greater than what we've got up front, and that includes Richarlison. And I think what you'll find is, forget this first game. I mean, all these people giving him a hard time. He's had 17 minutes football in 2.5 months. Can you imagine any of our players having 17 minutes football in 2.5 months and then getting roasted for missing a chance? But I think what you'll find is, you won't find him checking back like Johnson does. He will drive into that space, or he'll drive across the pitch to enable others to utilise the space. And maybe, just maybe, time with Werner will give Johnson some guidance as to how to utilise that pace.